Okay, thanks for coming back to another JP lesson. Today we're going to continue looking at Japanese structure, um, with the focus being on a couple of helper verbs. There are going to be additional concepts that we'll cover as well, but the focus is going to be on helper verbs and getting used to attaching them to verbs that we already know to form complex grammar concepts from there. So we're going to start with the receptive helper verb, which is rareru, which we already talked about last lesson. We're going to expand our meaning on that, right? So we talked about rareru meaning passive voice, but that's kind of an English explanation, and that doesn't complete the full picture. Rareru just means that the verb is received to something. Okay, so we talked about last lesson how you have kureru and ageru, which is to give an action to someone, right? And so doing it for someone's sake is to give an action to them, and how you can either have someone give you an action or you can give an action to them. Rareru then is the counterpart, where it is to get an action. So someone does something for you, or does something, and you receive the results of that action. So I'm going to use this hyphen get in the hyphen system when we have rareru as a helper verb. Okay, so the way you attach rareru, if it's a regular form, right, a regular verb, you make it the a stem and you add reru. So kiku will become kika, the ku will change to ka, and then reru. And if it's an iru-eru verb, then always drop the ru, add your helper, in this case rareru. So taberu will become taberareru, like this. Okay, and here you can see it with the hyphens. Here I'm going to call here get when it's attached like that, and eat, I'm then going to call it eat get when it's taberareru. So if we look at this sentence, Sakura ga shikarareta, right? Sakura is the subject, this is A, ga, and then B is the verb, shikarareta. There's three parts to that. So the first is shiku, shikaru, because this is rareru. So shikaru is to get scolding. Rareru means that she got scolded, and then ta is our past tense. So rareru becomes rareta. That tells us it's past tense. So was. So Sakura got scolded in the past. Okay, so what's happening here? What's happening is Sakura receives the action of being scolded by someone else. So someone else is doing the scolding, and Sakura receives that action of being scolded at. Okay, so Sakura is the subject. All right, she gets the scolding. And who is scolding Sakura? Well, that's the key to using rareru, right? It's whoever is scolding Sakura, doesn't matter, but we don't have to know who it is. We just know that Sakura got scolded. If we know who it was, then we can say that, and we have ways to say that, and we'll look at those. But at its base form, someone got scolded, right? So you get the action of whatever it is, in this case being scolded. So someone else does the verb, and then the subject of the sentence, in this case Sakura, receives that action. And so Sakura is the subject, and whoever else it is a different part of the sentence. Okay, and I'm going to highlight this. Rareru is the main verb, right? So e ga something rareru, right? So this rareru, e ga rareru, is the main idea. A got, and whatever else it is, or A gets, and whatever else it is that you're trying to say about it. So rareru becomes the main verb in the sentence, which is different from most cases where we have helper verbs. In most helpers, like mas, it's a polite form. So the main verb is actually the verb that mas attaches to. Same thing with tai, same thing with nai, these helper adjectives. The main verb is the verb that we're attaching this to. But rareru is a special case where it is the main verb. It is the action of getting that the subject does, and what they're getting is what the other different person is doing. So here's a way that you can say that. Mizu ga inu ni nomareta. So nomu was to drink. It's a regular verb. So mu becomes ma, no ma, reru, and then reru past tense reta. So noma reta. Okay. So mizu ga, the water, inu ni, by the dog, nomareta. Drink get was. So the water got drunk by the dog. So look again. Mizu ga, the subject is water. Okay? And it's receiving this action of nomu from something. Right? So it gets that action from the dog, which is the target, right? So this reru, so inu ga nomu becomes imu ni nomareta, because it gets this action of the dog drinking, and mizu is the subject. So mizu ga inu ni nomareta is your B. Okay? And so if you translate that to English, the water got drunk by the dog, this looks like passive voice to us in English. Because in English, we would say that the dog is the subject of this sentence, and the dog does the action of drinking water, but this is stated in the passive voice, and so it's the water got drunk by the dog. In Japanese, the water is the subject, and it gets drunk by the dog. You can do something similar here. Sakura wa dareka ni kaban ga nusumareta. Okay? So now look at what the ga marked subject is. The ga marked subject is kaban, which is bag. So Sakura, as for Sakura, dareka we saw last lesson, a way to make a question word out of, you take ka with this and it becomes like who. So dareka ni, so someone, by someone, kaban ga nusumareta. So this nusumu is to steal, and then that got stolen. So what we would say is Sakura ga kaban, Sakura no kaban ga nusumareta would be, okay. Maybe let's not go there. This is a way to say that Sakura's bag got stolen, right? So the subject is Sakura's bag. Sakura is just the topic. Speaking of Sakura, her bag received the action of being stolen by someone. Dareka ni nusumareta. Okay. We have a special case here where we can use what's called the meiwaku ukemi. Meiwaku means nuisance, and ukemi is just this particular grammar point, the receptive form. So meiwaku, meaning nuisance, this is something that you don't like. So this is a special case for rareru when you get a negative action, like in this case, nusumareta. Then, rather than saying that the bag received the action of stolen, we're allowed to say Sakura ga dareka ni kaban o nusumareta. So Sakura received from someone the action of kaban o nusumu, stealing bag. So that's kind of how it works. And then that makes it, rather than as for Sakura, her bag got stolen, which makes bag the subject. We now say Sakura got her bag stolen. Okay, so this is a special case of using rareru where you are allowed to change, right? So if you look at this sentence, kaban ga nusumareta, the rareru is done by the bag. So you're saying the bag got stolen. But when it is something negative, like a negative action like this, we want to say, well, the person is negatively affected by this, not the object. And so rather than saying the bag got stolen, we are allowed to use this particular construction if we wanted. Okay? And here, I'm explaining this again. So this nusumu, the bag is the object of nusumu. So kaban o nusumu forms this idea. And then the rareru attaches to that. Kaban o nusumu, rareta. And then you have the rest. So who received the action of bag getting stolen? Well, Sakura ga. And who did she receive it from? Darekani. Okay? All right. Let's talk about making adverbs. So we have adjectives, and we have two kinds of adjectives. We have adjectives, and then we have nouns which act like adjectives. So we're calling those na adjectives, but they are nouns. And sometimes we want to use those as adverbs. Rather than describing a noun, we want to describe a verb. In that case, we just have to modify the existing adjective to be in a form where it becomes an adverb. So for an adjective, right, a true adjective, because we know it ends in drop add ku. So hayai means fast, hayaku means fastly, right, or quickly. So if hayai is quick, hayaku is quickly. If it's a noun, right, so a na adjective, then to make it an adverb, you just add ni at the end. So shizuka means quiet. Shizuka ni is quietly, right? So this is kind of basically saying add -ly to your adjective. So I'm going to use this -ly to notate that we've modified an adjective into its adverb form. There are some nouns which are basically always adverbs rather than adjectives. And so those are allowed to be used as is. You don't need ni at the end. So those would be words like yukkuri, which means slowly. So you don't need to say yukkuri ni, you can just say yukkuri. Okay. Here's another concept. This is mo. So we talked about mo already, right? It was the inclusive marker. So if you had an idea, something wa, and you wanted to respond to that, and it was like, oh, the same thing for me, you could say, oh, yeah, mo as well, right? And say that also. So mo is also a non-logical particle. It basically works with the same rules as wa, but there's a difference in how you use the two. So wa can either introduce a topic or change the topic. Mo only changes the topic. So you can't use mo if, there isn't something that came before it that you're saying something about. Mo has to be used to introduce a new topic. And then, even though mo changes the topic, what we say does not change. What we're saying about the topic is the same. So if, for example, in the example we had where the waiter asks, what do you want? The first person says, robsta o kudasai. The second person says, boku mo robsta, right? They're saying the same thing. I also want lobster. So you can only use mo when you say the same thing about the topic. You can't change what you're saying. When we use wa, we're actually drawing a distinction between the previous and the new topic. So if we introduce a topic with wa, then of course we're obviously allowed to say different things. But if we have the same topic, right? So when we change a topic or when we introduce a topic, wa is used to talk about something different. If you're saying the same thing about the same topic, you use mo. We'll say it in action, it'll make a little more sense, right? 彼がコロネちゃん大好き。僕はおかゆちゃんだ。Okay? So, 彼が he, right, is the subject A. コロネちゃん大好き. So, he loves korone, right? Really likes korone. 僕は, now you draw a contrast, you're saying, but as for me, おかゆちゃんだ. As for me, what is daisuki is okayu-chan. So he loves korone, but I love okayu, is the way you would understand this. If you used mo, 彼がはーちゃま大好き。僕も同じだよ. So 同じ means the same. If you wanted, you could just say 僕もはーちゃま大好き, right? Same thing. But you're expressing the same idea. It doesn't have to be the exact same words, but the same idea. So he loves Hachima. I also am the same. So you change the topic. The topic changes from kare to boku. Instead of talking about him, we're now talking about me. That's what mo does. It changes the topic. But what you say about the topic, Hachima ga daisuki, is the same. With the first example, kare and boku, you are changing the topic from kare to boku, right, when you do this. But you're also, more importantly, changing what you're saying about the topic. So even if you had the same topic, you change what you with wa. Okay. Next, let's look at self-move and other move verbs. This is going to be kind of like a couple of rules of thumb, but the concept I want you to get is actually what is a self-move and what is an other move verb, and then it's okay if you don't remember all the rules at this moment. Okay, so in English, we have what are called transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. Okay, this is an idea that is also present in Japanese, but as kind of part of a bigger idea, which is self-move and other move. And because the word transitive is, a complicated word, it doesn't necessarily make sense, we're going to use this terminology, self-move and other move, which comes from Japanese, and we're just translating that. Okay, so the word doshi is the word for verb. It means move word. Okay, self-move then, right, you can see how if the verbs are move words, then you have self-move words and you have other move words. So self-move verbs are when the subject does something to themselves, like I stand up. And other move is when the subject does something to a different thing. So I throw the ball. So self-move, the subject acts upon itself, and other move, the subject acts on an object. A lot of Japanese verbs come in pairs of a self-move and an other move verb. So here are two examples. You have teru, which is the self-move form, which is to leave, to exit, to emerge, to emit, things like that. And then the same kanji, as you can see, this one is dasu, and dasu is the other move. So it's the same action as teru, which is for something to leave or to exit, but now you cause something else to do that. You don't exit yourself, you make something exit. So that would be to take something out or to bring something out, that kind of thing. You cause it to emit. Here's another example. There is makeru, which is to lose, right? That's self-move. So when you lose, makeru. But when you defeat someone, you make them lose, then it becomes makasu. And you see it's the same kanji, right? It's just the stuff afterwards that's different. This is how these verb pairs show up. So because they have the same kanji, you can generally recognize, okay, yeah, these are the same idea. And then what comes after it, this keru versus kasu, tells you if it is the self move or the other move form. So the way to think of this is like every self move verb kind of looks like aru in terms of how they work, right? So nani nani ga aru is something is, right? So every self move verb is going to follow a similar structure where it just does the thing. You don't have an object to that verb. The other move work like suru, nani nani o suru, right? Something o suru. So you have a object on which the verb acts. And so knowing which one is like aru and which one is like suru gives us clues as to which one is the self move and which is the other move. So here are the 3 laws. I'm going to give you all of them and then we'll go through them each one. So the first one is if it ends in su or seru, it is other move. The su as in, like suru. So if it ends in suru, basically, right? Like if it's makasu, that is the other move verb, and that is to defeat, for example. Or dasu, to take out. Those are the other move verbs. If it ends in a plus ru, right? Then this is like aru. Then it is the self move verb. All right, and we'll see examples of that. And then the last thing is that if you have the u stem and you change it to the a stem and add ru, then it changes what the verb type is. So if it was self move, it becomes other move, and if it was other move, it becomes self move. So let's look at all of these in examples, right? So if it ends in su, it's the other move. Makasu ends in su. Okay? And then the pattern that you usually see, but not always, is that if it ends in asu, then you change asu to eru and you get the self move form. So makeru is to lose, makasu is to defeat. Or make lose, makasu, lose, makeru. But that's not always true. It's not always asu to eru. For example, otosu, right, which is the other move form, and that is to drop something, cause something to fall. It ends in like an osu sound, and when you make it the self move, it is ochiru, which is to fall, and there's like an iru sound. So it's not always asu to eru only. There are exceptions to that. But always, if it ends in su, it is other move. Here's your second rule. If it ends in a plus ru, so right, so you think about writing the word in Romaji, right? So let's look at agaru. Agaru. This aru, right? If you see this aru at the end, it's self move. And then if you wanted to change the self move to the other move form, then you just change the aru to eru. So ageru. And that's this. So agaru is self move and it is to rise up. Ageru is other move and it is to raise something. Okay. And again, this is a usual pattern, but not always. For example, kurumaru is the self move, but it becomes just kurumu, not kurumeru. Okay. And then the last law is if you have the u stem and you make it, right? So if, for example, you had tasu, or let's not use tasu because that's a bad example. But, if you have a verb that ends in mu, then instead of mu, take out the u, make it e, and add ru, and that is the other form. So if a verb ends in mu, then meru is the other move ending, and that's the same for bu to beru and tsu to teru, where beru and teru become other move. These are general patterns, but this rule is always true, which is that if you change the u stem to a plus ru, then you get the opposite type of verb. So uru is to sell, right? Uru. You drop the u and add eru instead. Ureru, which is to be sold. Similarly, shitagau is to obey. Shitagaeru, right? Drop the u, add eru, is to force someone to obey, to make them listen. Okay. Here's another concept. These are going to be like, just a series of grammar concepts, and then hopefully we'll put them all together at the end. So here's a concept: the inclusive versus the exclusive and. This is not in English, right? It does not exist in English. So we know that we use to list things that are in a list, right? So pen to enpitsu ga aru. There is a pen and there is a pencil. We can also use ya. We say pen ya enpitsu ga aru. Okay, so we have to, which means and we have ya, and this also means and. In English, they mean the same thing. But in Japanese, they don't mean the same thing. In Japanese, to is the exclusive and that means that apart from the things that were listed, there is nothing else. So if we say pen to enpitsu ga aru, we are saying there is a pen and there is a pencil, and that is all there is. There is no other things. Ya is inclusive and, which means that there are things beyond what I'm listing, potentially, right? But I'm just mentioning the things that I feel like mentioning. So when we say pen ya enpitsu ga aru, you could imagine it's like, here's a bunch of things you can use to draw with. There's a pen, there's a pencil, there might be some other stuff, but they're mainly focused on, well, there's a pen, there's a pencil, maybe some other stuff. That's when you use ya. So ya most often would be when you were thinking about options of things that you can do, and you're listing those or things that you can choose. You're going to focus on the options that you're interested in, but you would use ya to indicate that, well, there are other options, but I'm not considering them. Versus to is, these are the only options available. Okay, so ya is useful. It lets you imply a list is not complete. And to also, does the converse, and it says that is the list. There is nothing else. Okay, here is another concept. This is if you want to try doing something. So to try to do something, you're going to use the te form of a verb and then add miru. Okay, miru is to see or to look. And te form, we said, is going to be like verb and whatever comes else. So if you say verb te miru, that's like I will do and see. In English, this is kind of what you do. It's right. It's like, well, I'll go and see what happens, for example. Or, I'll try to juggle it and see what happens, that kind of thing. So that's how te miru would work. There's a different way you can do it, which is the volitional form of the verb, which we haven't talked about yet, but that's the o stem plus u. Okay. And then you say to suru. So volition is an English word. I think it comes from Latin, and it means related to using one's will. So when you use volitional form, that means that you're setting your will to do the verb. You have decided in your mind that I'm going to take actions so that the verb happens. So if you say to suru, it makes the verb I intend to do the verb. And here's an example. Yama is mountain. Yama ni noboru is to climb a mountain. So noboru, change the ru to ro, and then add u. This becomes the volitional form. So yama ni noboro to suru. right? You can kind of say, I've turned yama ni noboro. Let's climb a mountain. To suru. I did this idea of let's climb a mountain. So there's a difference between using temiru and tosuru and why you would choose one over the other, right? Temiru is used when you can do the action, like you have the potential to do the action, and you're just not sure how the result is going to turn out. Tosuru is when you don't even know if you can do the action, right? So in the example here, yama ni noboro tosuru is, well, let me see if I can climb the mountain. You don't know for sure. So it's like, I'm going to try to climb the mountain. You don't know if you'll succeed, but you're going to try. If you said nobotte miru, then that's kind of like saying, I'm going to climb the mountain, right? And it's just, you're saying it's like, well, I'm going to try climbing the mountain. But really, you're saying, well, I'm going to succeed. It's just, I'm going to see how it is to do that. Let's use taberu, which is a verb we know well, to eat, with both forms. If you say tabete miru, I will try eating the food, implying, because I want to see how it tastes, right? So I'm going to try the food. Versus tabeyo to suru is, I will see if it is possible for me to eat the food. So, if you imagine you're sick and you're not able to keep your food down, and someone says, well, you really should eat. Here I brought you bread and milk, for example, something that's supposed to be simple to eat. Then you can say tabeyo to suru. I will see if I can eat it. I'll try to eat it. I don't know if I'll be able to keep it down. Versus tabete miru would be, here I've cooked something, a dish for you. Tell me how it is. Then you say tabete miru. Well, let me eat it and tell you. To here, right, in this to suru, it's the quotation particle that we've seen before. But it doesn't always have to just put things in double quotes because that is the idea. To can just encapsulate it into a clause or an idea. So we say to suru, right? We take whatever the idea is before and we put it in a box. Hold on. There we go. So when we say to suru, right, we take this idea that we have and we put it in a box, and we're going to try doing what is in the box. Okay? So we encapsulate the idea. We put it in a capsule. So this idea of using to like this to put things in a box, this goes beyond the volitional form like this to say tabeyo to suru kind of things. We use this a lot, and I'll give you an example. So you can just use to suru without a volitional form, right? Sakura o nihonjin to suru. Let's look at this. Sakura o, sakura is the object. Nihonjin is Japanese person. To suru. So suru is the verb. Suru, object is sakura. So do this to Sakura. And what are we doing? Nihonjin to. Take Sakura to be a Japanese person. This is how it works. Okay? So when you use this way, to suru, it's like, okay, let's take this idea, put it in a box. Sakura wa nihonjin. And put this in a box. And then say, so let's do, let's proceed as if Sakura is a Japanese person. And so that's how you get this meaning. Alternatively, if it's not an abstract thing, but an actual physical thing, right? You say, kaban o makura to suru. So kaban was bag, makura is pillow. Kaban o makura to suru. The bag, I'm going to proceed as if it is a pillow. So in natural English, that's I'm going to use my bag as a pillow. If you want it to be consistent with the way that I translated the last sentence, then you can say, take my bag to be a pillow. But that doesn't actually convey what we're doing. If I say, kaban no makura to suru, I'm actually saying I'm going to use my bag as a pillow, not just assume, right, that hypothetically, if my bag was a pillow, but I'm actually going to make that happen. So tosuru basically is take something to be another thing. You can think of it that way in English. Then toshite becomes the te form of that, the connective. So let's take something to be this other thing, and then. And this basically, it works like the English word as. Okay? America jin toshite chisai. Right? So if we consider them, if we take whatever it is that we're talking about to be an American person, America jin toshite. So if we make whatever it is we're talking about into an American person, chisai, they're small. So as an American, they're small. Realistically, if I was translating the English, I would call this for an American. But again, we don't need a one-to-one correlation of natural English to natural Japanese. We just need to understand the concept, and then we can figure out how to translate that into something that makes natural sense. You can also use to iu. So we said iu is a verb that means to say. And we had to iu. There was, one way, which is something to itta. They said this. But there is another way to use this. Okay? And that is, for example, like this. Fushigi no kuni no arisu to iu hon. So hon is book. Fushigi no kuni no arisu is Alice in Wonderland. Fushigi is weird or strange. Kuni is country, but really it just means like a land, some kind of a place. And arisu is Alice in katakana. So weird countries, Alice, Alice in Wonderland. To iu, right? So this gets placed in a box. And it's like, whatever this is, called book. So a book called Alice in Wonderland. Now you might have heard this phrase, toyu wake de, or toyu koto de. Okay, if I write toyu wake de in Japanese with kanji, iu, and this is wake, toyu wake de. In natural English, toyu koto de or toyu wake de would be like, so with that said, or that being the reason. And the way you use this is to is encapsulating whatever your previous sentence was, right? So you'll say something, right? You'll say, sekai chu no ichiban oishii tabemono wa keiki desu, right? So which is like, in the entire world, the most tasty item is cake. Toyu wake de, keiki o ippai tabemasu, right? With that said, I will eat tons of cakes. So what's important for you is not to understand those two sentences. It's that the first sentence is a complete thought, and then you encapsulate that entire thought with just to and say what it is you were going to say about it. So in this case, to iu, and in, wake de, so with that being the reason, de as in with, wake is, we'll talk about it, but it's kind of like an underlying logic. To iu is called. So with a logic that you can say like this, which is this, then, whatever you said before, with that, and then whatever it is that you're going to say next. To iu is such a commonly used concept that it gets shortened to te, right? So to iu becomes te very often. And it does the same thing as iu. And this te can stand in for wa, because it's kind of like encapsulated something and made it a topic, right? To iu, right? Something called this. You change that to wa, it kind of works the same way. Look at this. Sakura wa nihonjin da. Sakura is a Japanese person. Sakura te nihonjin da, right? There is a Japanese person who goes by Sakura. Sakura to iu nihonjin da. A Japanese person called Sakura. All right. I just want to point out, you cannot use te. The way that you're using te like this when you say Sakura te Nihonjin, right? So like if I talk about Sakura, she is a Japanese person, and if you say Sakura wa speaking of Sakura, she is a Japanese person. You can only do that with te. You can't use that with to or to you specifically, because if you say Sakura to, then that becomes, like Sakura, a Japanese person. Or if you say Sakura to you, then it is like a Japanese person called Sakura. But if you say Sakura te Nihonjin da, then you're saying, oh, when I talk about Sakura, she's a Japanese person. Okay? After this, there was some Alice in Wonderland stuff, but we're going to skip reading that for now so we can move to the next concept. If you have any questions, though, go ahead and ask them, and I'll get the next set of slides up. Okay, I don't see any, so let's move to the next stuff. So now let's talk about another helper verb, saseru. Okay, saseru is the causative helper verb. I'm going to show you how it attaches first, and then we'll talk about what it does. This also attaches to the a stem, just like rareru. So for a regular verb, kiku becomes kika, and then you add seru instead of reru, right? You add seru. And if it's an irueru verb, then taberu, drop the ru, add saseru, tabe saseru. Okay? So if you think of rareru as the self-move verb, which means to get something, then saseru is kind of like an other move verb, right? They're not exactly those, but you can think of them that way. Okay? So if rareru says that you get an action that someone else did, saseru is making an action happen to someone else. They get the action instead of you. Right? So if you say tabe rareru is to get, eat, then tabe saseru is to cause to eat. So we still have tabe in both cases, which is kind of like verb A, and that is the one that is done by the actor. And then there is rareru or saseru, which is verb B, and that's done by a different thing. So let's look at two different sentences with that verb A and verb B construction, and I think that will make rareru versus saseru very clear. Mizu ga inu ni nomareta. Okay, so I've color-coded this. This is kind of like two sentences. Mizu ga rareta, water got, right? Even though rareru isn't a verb on its own, it's a helper verb, but you can think of it this way, mizu ga rareta. And then this core idea, which is inu ga nonda, the dog drank. So mizu ga inu ni nomarareta, right? Really, there is water is doing verb B, which is rareru, and the dog is doing verb A, which is nomu, to drink. If we make that saseru instead, we still have two subjects like we had with rareru. There is A, which is doing this, and water is doing B, and dog is doing A. So if we say watashi ga inu o tabe saseta, right? Watashi ga, I am doing the action of saseru, and then within that, inu ga tabeta, right? Same construction as we had before. Watashi ga saseta, I made it happen. What did you make happen? Inu ga tabeta, I made the dog eat. It's the same kind of nested structure of one idea which gets inserted into this other sentence with the two verbs. And watashi ga is doing either this rareru or saseru. And within that, right, inu o tabe saseta or mizu ga inu ni nomarareta, Which particle you're using there depends on if you're using rareru or saseru to make these actions make sense. That said, we don't have to say watashi ga inu o tabe saseta because we can use the zero pronoun. So if we remove it, inu o tabe saseta, right? This still means I caused the dog to eat, but very often we're going to see sentences where we don't have a clear ga, right? And so it's going to be inu o tabe saseta. And you have to figure out who the zero pronoun is. And you can generally do that from context, and we'll look at strategies on how to do that eventually. But this is how, this is why knowing that the zero pronoun exists and how it works is very important. So generally in English, you would translate saseru in two ways in natural English. There's either you made them do something or you allowed them to do something. And it's like, well, which is it? Did you make the dog eat? Like, did you force it to eat? Or did you allow the dog to eat? Did you give it permission to eat? Right? And in fact, it actually means neither of those. It just means that I set up circumstances so that the dog could eat. Okay? So in general, saseru will either mean I made them do this or I let them do this, right? If you wanted to ask for permission for something, you would use saseru plus, kureru, for example. Allow me, please give me the action, right? So cause this set of circumstances to exist so that I can do this verb. Okay, how does that work? So when you translate saseru into natural English, use the context of the sentence to figure out how to translate it into natural English. Sensei ga asoba saseta. Right? Teacher, play cause was. So realistically, think about it. Is a teacher more likely to force you to play, or are they more likely to allow you to play? And based on that, you can figure out how you want to translate that. So most likely, teacher let us play, right? Otou-san ga benkyou saseta, right? So saseta is just the saseru form of suru. So benkyou saseta is made study, right? Study cause was. Is father more likely to let you study or make you study? Think about the sentence and then pick the one that seems most appropriate. So in this case, made me study. That said, you can imagine scenarios where you have the exact same sentence, and in this case, teacher made us play because it was gym class and my leg was hurting, but my teacher forced me to play. Or you could have this case where I had a test coming up and my dad wanted me to go to a party and I didn't want to go because I had to study. So my dad let me study instead of making me go to the party. You can imagine scenarios where that makes sense, but if it's such a complicated scenario where, all that context is required, you would have that before this sentence. You don't have to, from this one sentence, figure it out. You would have additional context. Okay. Here's a really interesting concept, and this is particles in relation to human interaction. So we know o, we know ni, and we know to. As we move down this way, the person that you're marking with this, their autonomy in the sentence increases, right? So o is an object marker. That means the verb is just done to it. Ni is a target marker. So there's some involvement of the target with the action. Like when I say anata ni boru o nageru, I'm throwing the ball to you. There's some involvement there. You're expected to then receive the ball, do something with it. And then to is joining. We're both doing the action together. Right? So o as an object. So I have 3 sentences that basically are the same. I changed the verb here or there, but this should demonstrate the changing, how the person's autonomy increases. Boku ga nyani tan o utsu. In this case, utsu is to hit. We'll say slap, right? So in this sentence, I'm saying I slap nyani tan. Here, nyani is just in the sentence, right? He has no direct involvement with me taking the action utsu. I can do utsu to an inanimate object, right? Instead of nyani, I could slap a pillow, I could slap the board, whatever, any number of things. They have no involvement with the action. I do it the same way, whether I'm hitting a person or I'm hitting an object. How I do the action is not affected. English doesn't have words to indicate this because that's just how verbs work in English. When you say, I carried my daughter to bed, or Snape killed Dumbledore, right? These are the same kind of nuance, okay? Where when you carry your daughter to bed, it's like carrying a water bottle to bed, right? Either way, the daughter, the water bottle, they don't have any involvement with you doing the action of taking it to the bedroom. Similarly, when you say Snape killed Dumbledore, there's nothing that Dumbledore could have done that caused him to die. Not getting into Harry Potter lore itself. And if it was a different person instead of Dumbledore, the action kind of would have played out the same way. Ni is a target, right? Boku ga nyani-tan ni shimesu. Shimesu is to demonstrate something, okay? So demonstration, right? Think of it this way. Nyani, if I'm demonstrating something to Nyani, he is kind of required to listen to what I'm showing him and see what I'm doing to understand the demonstration. I can't just demonstrate to an inanimate object because the idea of demonstration is it is for someone to understand what I'm doing, right? So Nyani has some autonomy, but it's still primarily me doing the action, right? Nyani is just passively receiving the action, but I'm the one that's actually doing most of the stuff. And so in English, you would generally use to for that. And that makes sense. Ni, we've often translated as to, and it's the target. So when I say, anata ni nageru, I throw the ball to you. So me throwing the ball is kind of the same. But there's an expectation then that when I do the action throw, there's kind of a reaction from you of some kind, an associated action as well. And it's not the same action, but something, some involvement. You're not just there. To is joining. Boku ga nyani-tan to hanasu. I talk with nyani-tan this time, right? So now, because I'm talking, hanasu, it's a conversation. So Nyani will talk back, right? So if I'm doing hanasu and he's also doing hanasu, then it makes sense why you're saying to hanasu. We're doing the same action, so I am talking and he is talking, so together we talk to each other. And if you look at the difference then, for example, if you said nyani ni hanasu and nyani to hanasu, it's the same difference that exists if in English you said talking with and talking to. Talking to would be nyani ni hanasu. I told him this, so I talked to him about it, right? Nyani ni hanashita. I told Nyani about this. Versus Nyani to hanashita is I spoke to Nyani, we talked to each other. So saseru kind of has this autonomy. We can't use to, right, with saseru because to involves both people having equal autonomy, and saseru by definition, that's not possible. Saseru means that you caused an action to happen. Right? So if they had equal autonomy, you can't have caused it to happen on your own. Okay? But we can express whether it happened with no involvement or it happened with some involvement of a different person. Otou-san ga boku o benkyou saseta. Here it is, I didn't have a choice. I had to study. Father made me study. お父さんが僕に遊ばせた. Ni means I have some involvement. Father let me play, and then I have the choice if I want to play or not, right? So father still has caused this action of to play, and it's just my choice that I choose to go along with it and follow through and actually play. But it's not always that simple, because if there is an O-marked object in the nested sentence, and I'll show you an example, then we have to use ni even when there is no autonomy. So for example, 私が犬に肉を食べさせた, right? So the inside subclause, right, this part that's in orange, is 犬が肉を食べた. So because it's 肉を食べた is already present, I can't have two O's. That makes it unclear which O is for 食べる. So I change 犬が肉を食べた to 犬に肉を食べさせた, right? So by the dog, meat, eat, cause. So I caused the dog to eat meat, right? And then 私が is the subject saying I did that. And as we talked about, 私が食べさせた, it's not so much that I forced it to eat or I allowed it to eat. In this case, it's just I fed it. So I fed the dog meat. So in this case, we have to use ni for inu in this sentence because niku is already marked by o, and we don't want to have, this confusion of, well, did you feed the dog meat or did you feed the meat dog? Okay, so having all of this together, having understood saseru really well, we have the causative receptive. So rareru plus saseru to form saserareru. Okay? So here's how saserareru works. It's an irueru verb, attaches to the a stem, just like saseru does. So no changes. Kiku will become kikasasereru. And irueru for taberu, drop the ru, tabe saserareru. So now there are three verbs in our sentence, and we're going to have three actors as well. Here is a sentence that does that. 私がブロッコリーを食べさせられた. Okay? So, let's break this down. It's always going to work out to in. So, 私がられた, I got. Okay? させる, we don't know what that attaches to. And then ブロッコリーを食べる, eating broccoli. Okay? So if we look at who is the actors for each of these, rareru is watashi, I got. Saseru, we don't know yet. Taberu also is watashi. Okay? I was made to eat broccoli. Okay, so whenever we use saserareru, the primary actor, which is who gets the action, and the tertiary actor, which is the person that does the action that is ultimately in the middle, are the same thing. And then who gives the action is different. Right? And here it is color-coded. So, watashi ga rareta, I got. What did I get? Broccoli o tabe saseru. So I got the action of being caused to eat broccoli. It doesn't say who made me eat broccoli, right? And we can choose if we want to say who gave me this, right? By using our normal saseru forms. But that's optional because the focus is I was forced to eat broccoli. And when you say I was forced to eat broccoli, you don't say who forced you. You might say that in a future sentence. You can add that context. But I was forced to eat broccoli conveys all the information that you're trying to say. There was broccoli. I didn't want to eat it. Someone made me. I had to eat it. Okay? So when you say this, saserareru, it ends up meaning like forced to there was something I did not want to do, right? Like broccoli o taberu, but I had to. If you wanted a positive version of that, you could say sasete morau, but we'll talk about morau later, and I don't think we're going to reach morau in these sessions. So if you want to know about morau, just let me know. I'll tell you later. Okay, so that's saserareru. It's not a common form, but it usually shows up only to say like, oh, someone made me do something. That's when you could say saserareta. Okay, let's look at the koso ado pattern, right? We've seen the koso ado pattern. We know the spheres of influence and how that works, but let's go deeper on this. So here's this idea, tokoro, which means place. And this is where the ko in koko comes from. Here it is written in kanji. Koko, this place. Soko, that place. Asoko, that over there place. And then toko, what place. No one really uses these kanji, so you don't have to know them. But I just like to point out that this is the origin of the koso ado pattern, and then how those modify the places, and therefore where these names come from. Aru is to be. Aru is kind of like the re in kore, sore, are, tore. You're noticing the same ko, so, a, do, right, in the kanji. And so kore is here thing, so this thing. Sore is that thing. Are is that over there thing. And then dore is what thing. Adjectival noun class markers, right? So this is how we make no adjectives. You turn something into an adjective out of a noun. So kono is this one. Sono is that one, because it is, well, we had this thing, and we have a thing that is of this, so it is here's thing, so it's this thing, versus there's thing is that thing, and so on. Okay, so if you look at kore versus kono, for example, kore wa pen da is this thing is a pen. Kono pen wa akai is this here's pen, speaking of it, is red. So I talked about this. There's a subtle distinction, but the re group, kore, sore, are, dore, is like aru. It is a pen. Kono, sono, ano, dono relates to location as an adjective. So you're going to use it to describe the pen. So this pen is red. So from the group, from the kore, sore, are, dore being related to aru, you get that it has to be about the pen, right? When you say kore, you're saying talking about this thing, and you talk about it. If you say kono, it's an adjective. So it's like, well, this pen is, and what you say about it, as opposed to this is, and whatever it is. Okay. So we know that we can use na to turn a noun into an adjective. So kirei na hana, out of hana ga kirei da, that changes to na, kirei na hana. So we can use na to make adjectives, okay? And the way you do that is no yo na, okay? No yo, yo means form. So something no yo is like this is form, and then na makes it an adjective, and that gets shortened into just na, right? Na. So konna is like this, sonna like that, anna like that over there, and donna is like what? Okay? And so whether you're going to use konna or sonna, or maybe even anna, is dependent on the distance, right? The metaphorical distance or, metaphorical distance in both space or in time or space-time from our current self. So konna is right here, right now, as I am. Konna tabemono ga suki. This kind of food, which is right here in front of me, I like it. If you say, sonna koto ga hidoi, that kind of thing isn't kind, right? Hidoi means cruel. Koto we saw, abstract thing, that just means thing. Sonna koto, thing like that, hidoi, it's unkind. Something like that is unkind. In fact, sonna koto ga hidoi is just shortened to sonna, and it's an interjection. So if someone says something you don't like, you can say sonna. Or if someone tells you, hey, go do this, and or they're saying, you're going to do this, right? It's like, for example, if someone accuses you of murder, right? Then sonna is like, no way, I would never do that kind of thing, right? That's how sonna works, just on its own. You're going to hear especially anime girls say this a lot in shows. So if you just hear sonna, they're disagreeing or they're expressing some disappointment with what it is that the other person has said. Some kind of not agreeing. It's like, hey, you can't say that. Okay. If you lengthen the vowel, it becomes an adverb. So ko, so, a, and do becomes like this, like that over there, and how. So, so desu ne, Yago's favorite slang, right? So is like that. Des, it is like that. Ne, isn't it? So, it is like that, isn't it? In modern English, if I had to translate this, I would more say, it do be like that. I think this is how kids say it on the internet, right? It do be like that. So this is just agreeing that, yeah, the way you describe stuff, that's how it is. So, for example, Yago is saying, so desu ne. He's just stating agreement with the thing that somebody has said and saying, yeah, what you're saying is true. And then he adds his thoughts if he has it. Interestingly, though, with Yago, it happens to be a weird thing where he always responds with so desu ne. So you could ask him a question and he'll be like, yes, well, the reason that you asked that question, that is true. So now let me respond to the question. It's a little weird, but it is grammatically sound. He can do that. Okay. We can have a koso ado pattern with iu, koto. Iu as in say, koto, thing. Here it is in kanji, iu, koto, right? Adding that to this ko, which was an adverb, and iu is your verb. So ko iu is say like this. Koto is thing, right? So a thing that is like this, or a thing that is like that. For soyu koto, ayu koto, thing like that, way over there. And then doyu koto is what kind of thing, okay? These are abstract stuff. So this is not the kore, sore, are, dore, which are a thing, this thing, that thing, where they're concrete stuff. Koyu koto, soyu koto, these are abstract ideas, which is why you have koto in them. Expanding on that, doyu koto, you will hear this a lot as well. And this is seeking clarification from someone. It's like, what do you mean, right? Doyu, right? What kind of thing is it that you're saying it like that? How can you say that thing? What is it that makes you say that? Why do you say that? What do you mean? In modern English, I would call this bruh, what? Right? Because that's kind of how you would use doyu koto. Not so much in terms of the formality of it, but in terms of how versatile it is as a response when you're seeking clarification. So if, someone says a line from Doctor Who and they say, we have to reverse the polarity of the neutron flow, and you're like, what does that even mean? You're like, doyu koto? What does that mean? Right? Bruh, what? reverse the polarity of neutron flow? That doesn't make sense. Alternatively, if you say Nyani is trending on Twitter, right? Then it's the same. Bro, what? Nyani is trending? That kind of a thing. So it comes through in your tone, but the word is the same. Whether you say, bruh, what? This is confusion. And this, it's not confusion, it's more like shock, right? But it's the same. It's asking a question, and it's using the same words to do it. Okay, so we'll pause there. There's a lot more stuff that we can talk about in structure. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in chat. I think because tomorrow is going to be the last of these sessions, while I can continue talking about structure stuff, I can point you to where all the structure stuff comes from. So I think I want to talk about kanji. There don't tend to be video resources for the ideas that I want to show you about kanji. They tend to mostly be in articles, and that can be tough to read. And then especially there's kind of like an assumption that you're already learning kanji, and so you'll recognize some of those concepts. So I'm going to try and show you how kanji works and how you can like learn, not just memorize them as they are, but apply some sort of like a logical process to understanding them. So even when you see a new kanji that you've never seen before, you can kind of figure out what it means, but additionally, some strategies on how to look up a kanji that you've never seen before, right? Like if it was a word in hiragana or katakana, you can just type it. If it's a kanji that you don't know, how do you type it? Well, I'll show you how you can do that as well. Okay. So hopefully that will be a good lesson for all of you. And then going forward in terms of what we will do from there, since I won't be able to do these EU sessions for you guys at a time that's good for you, I'll probably just stream the Japanese lessons that I do normally, and then you'll hopefully be able to watch the archives. I think there might be a little bit of a information gap, because in terms of the Japanese structure, if we say the set of slides was lesson 4, I think I've gone as far as like 16 or 17 lessons with the other session. But I'll make sure that I can catch you up. All right. So thank you for coming again. One more lesson before you're free. And if you want to continue your journey, I'll give you tons of resources. You can always ask me. And yeah, so kanji tomorrow, the last frontier.